Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Album Fight Club. As usual, I'm your host, Mike Kane. I'm here with Cody Constantine, as always. It's just the two of us this time. And for today's episode, we have a bit of a passionate one for myself. But before we get to it, Cody has requested that I give him a minute to just talk about something. So I will allow Cody to take that time now.
In the broader world of lyrics and poetry and written word, at least in the American spirit, over the last 2 weeks, we lost Cormac McCarthy, who, in my opinion, is one of the great American novelists or authors or whatever you'd like to call him. When I was 16, I read The Road for the first time, and it hit me in such a guttural way. His stories, Blood Meridian and No Country for Old Men, and obviously The Road, all the Pretty Horses, they're all what I consider now canon American stories. And in the terms of, and the idea of heavier art, heavier things, all of his stories involve some kind of theme of loss or grief or loneliness or absence in light of things. And I think that the American arts community suffered a great loss today or well, not today, but the last couple weeks with the death of one of the great American poets. So I would just wanted to say thank you to Cormac, in whatever capacity for writing incredible stories that aren't safe, that took risk, that took chances. And if you feel inclined to, please check out one of his stories. They're all incredible. Blood Meridian, actually, in particular, is being turned into a movie, which is going to be interesting to see how they take such a over the top violent tale and make it safe for what today's audiences can handle. So rest in peace, Cormac McCarthy. Thank you for writing such beautiful stories.
Yeah, it's always hard when a great artist of any kind is lost. In fact, it somewhat ties into today's episode. I'll bring it back for what we're talking about today, but Cormac, definitely one of the greats, definitely extremely influential. And in fact, I think some of his works have been made into really great other works, like movies, for example. I think of No Country for Old Men, which I think is an incredible movie. So Cody said all I could say, just rest in peace, big loss. And at least we have his works and you can live on through his works, which we'll have forever, which is great. So for the topic today, I said that this is a passionate one for me. Maybe not Cody so much, but of course, Cody being musically inclined as he is, I know he has stuff to say about this. If I could open this up by just giving an anecdote and also a primer into why this is passionate for me. If you read the title of the episode, you'll know what we're talking about, but I want to set this up. So back in April, Cody and I were actually in a play together. We were in a staged version of A Few Good Men. And it was great. Jason actually directed it. We had a very good time, a very good show. And so we would spend a lot of time backstage when we weren't on stage, just talking, shooting shit. And I remember at one point during the rehearsal process, I was walking backstage and Cody was there. And at this point, I've known Cody for years. I know he's musically inclined. I know he has a lot of opinions about music. And so just out of the blue, I said, "Hey, Cody, what's the best Slayer album?" And without missing a beat, Cody goes South of Heaven. And immediately one thing sprang to my mind, which is, does he really think South of Heaven is better than Rain and Blood? And then the second thing that popped in my mind was, what does he think of Seasons in the Abyss? And so we had a short little conversation there. And when it came time to do Album Fight Club, one of the immediate matchups I had in my mind, at least, was South of Heaven versus Seasons in the Abyss. Now, many Slayer fans might ask, well, what about Rain and Blood? Here's the thing. Rain and Blood, not only do I think is the best Slayer record, but I actually believe it's one of the greatest metal albums ever across all the genres of metal. In fact, on some days, it's actually my favorite metal album of all time, but it's so niche in what it is. Like, it's literally 29 minutes of just speed and aggression. And I think comparing it to South of Heaven and Seasons in the Abyss, while you could compare the two, I think South versus Seasons itself is more applicable. So that's why we landed on this matchup. The second thing I want to talk about before we get to this, and then I'll give the floor to Cody if he wants to introduce Slayer in any way, is the big four, obviously, of thrash metal are Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, Anthrax. And for me, for most of my life, Metallica was not only the first one I was introduced to, but my favorite of the big four by like miles and leagues. Um, I like Anthrax. If there's one of the big four I have to put at the bottom for me, it's just Anthrax. It's just what it is. I think they make good music, but it never really like sparked me like the other three have. Um, Number three would be Megadeth. I think Megadeth has excelled in many ways and completely fallen on their face in many other ways. And like I said, for a long time, Metallica was number one and Slayer was two. But then when I got to college, I don't know, man, something about Metallica just started to go down and Slayer just started to come up. So for me, for the last several years, Slayer has been not only my favorite of the big four, but one of my favorite bands ever, which I'll get into why as we discuss some of the tracks here. But I'm diehard Slayer fan. I'm actually wearing my favorite Slayer shirt. Of course, it's not playing for audio, so it doesn't matter. But for me, when it comes to just metal music, I think Metallica's obviously is lauded and they should be. But when you think of the stereotypes of metal, which is adrenaline pumping, speed, in your face, just music, I think Slayer just kind of gets it. But again, that's why we're all different. So Cody, what do you think of Slayer?
Slayer to me has always been the your vagrant cousin who at one point in their life only train hopped. They probably did backpacking in Europe, but not like safe backpacking in Europe. At one point, they might have been in prison, not jail, actual prison. Uh, might have like a cool pinup girl tattoo on their sleeve. But when the other three bands in the big four kind of started getting safe, I would say, Metallica switched more to like hard rock. Megadeth has always been Megadeth, but they've always been kind of like goofy. The riffs are always good,
Oh yeah.
but they've always been just a little goofy. For example, yeah, in Symphony of Destruction, hearing Dave Mustaine go, watching him turn into a god, could be the funniest line delivery in the music history. And then Anthrax has always kind of rode the line for me, where they're always more fun. Like Mike and I went and saw Converge recently, and I would stage dive to Anthrax. Slayer has always scared me, truly scared me. And listening to these two records made me realize that, man, for their ups and downs, for them getting a little weird and making some interesting choices, Slayer always kicked ass. And I don't think they ever really had that fall on their face moment. And I think that, yeah, Slayer is like, Slayer is old school bodybuilding, where it's like, yeah, we didn't have pre-workout. I just kind of woke up in the morning and was angry. And so I
Hmm.
went and I lifted an engine by myself and then went home and took a shower. And
Yeah,
go ahead,
I
Mike.
think Slayer, as personified as a human, I think Slayer has been to jail multiple times. Like I
Oh,
think that's just part of their life. Yeah.
and they haven't been to like they haven't been to honorable jail. They're not Dominic Toretto, where it's like I did it all for family. They definitely beat a man to death outside of a
Oh yeah.
Waffle House.
They're in Supermax like at least three times.
They spent some time in Gitmo,
Yeah.
justifiably. But
And another thing you mentioned real quick is that, again, this is maybe a hot take for a lot of people, and I sometimes think it's a hot take too. But Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, Slayer, a lot of people, even in their fandom, agree that the earlier work is much better than the later work for all four of those bands, and I think that is true. Um, I think for every one of them, I can't think of one of those bands where like a later album in their career was as good as like their best in their early work. But for me as well, Slayer's first five albums, I'm not saying they're better, but I like them more than Metallica's first five. I like them more than Megadeth's first five, and I certainly like them more than Anthrax's first five. I think Metallica's first five albums are better, but I don't like I would rather go to Slayer's first five than Metallica's. But again, that's just a personal stance, it's just a personal take.
I think that yeah, I could agree to that. Once they hit that level of they're only playing like football arenas, I
Mhm.
feel like they started kind of like I said, getting safe. Uh, they have their heavier moments, and I very much am happy that they have the success and they carried the torch in a lot of ways. But no, Slayer always Slayer always felt like they were running on 10. And yeah,
Oh
you
yeah.
fall on your face at some point, but like they were still always running on 10. And going back to your comment about Raining Blood, I think that Raining Blood is in that holy mountain of
Mm.
nothing's going to touch this. There's no reason to talk about it. It's like in a lot of ways, Raining Blood is like Abbey Road. Everybody goes through that phase where they're like, the Beatles fucking suck. Yeah, all right, get to 30, and if you think the Beatles suck, stop smoking American spirits. Stop trying to hit on women at coffee shops. Figure out what the fuck you're doing. You know, and I think Raining Blood sits in that rarefied air of it's perfect the whole way. Even the kind of weird decisions, like the bass tone's a little weird, drum tones are kind of strange, but like, no, they fucking got it right. Stop trying to
Yeah.
shit on it,
It's often agreeably considered the greatest thrash metal record of all time, and I really don't think it'll ever be beaten.
No,
It's
I
one of
mean,
those situations.
it solidified what that sound needs to be.
Hmm.
Metallica had the blueprint, but Slayer took it and said, all right, yeah, but we're going to speed this up, make it a little more dangerous. It 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 is like it's like the West Side Story knife fight. Like this is perfect. You don't need this. It's like The Outsiders. We don't need this to be anything else.
Which is why I think South versus Seasons is more interesting. Because for me, I mean, Rain and Blood would stomp anything it goes up against, just because of how much I love Rain and Blood.
Yeah.
But I love these two records as well. I'm not going to give it away yet, but these are my number 2 and number 3 ranked Slayer records. I'm not going to say which one is above the other, but by miles, Rain and Blood, I think, just takes number 1. So that's not as interesting as that sort of matchup. So that's why we're here today. And again, Cody obviously has opinions when it comes to these records, but like for me, man, I don't want to be generic but like I love this band, I love this group, I love their first 5, and I love these 2 records. So
well,
that's why we're here.
And it is interesting to kick off this conversation that these are both recorded by Rick Rubin.
Mm-hmm.
That's wild. Listening to these 2 records and imagining a young, hungry Rick Rubin being like, I'm going to throw a fucking plant at Tom Araya,
Yeah.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah. Because he was so associated with like hip hop music and then he goes to like extreme, well, not extreme metal, but like just the total opposite of what people who were in his fandom or knew what he was doing would go to.
Yeah.
But that's why he's great.
Are you ready to get into this?
Yeah, sure.
Let's do it, man. I'll let you go first.
So first matchups, and okay, I know but I want to preface that this is, I feel like I've said this every episode, but this is really true for this one, is that some of these matchups are just so difficult for me. Now, I don't know how you feel, but like for me, I mean, again, this is one of my favorite bands we're talking about, 2 of my favorite albums, and like some of these matchups are just like excruciating, which includes this first one, which is the title track of South of Heaven versus War Ensemble, the 2 openers. And it's funny because you see a lot of patterns in these 2 records, but you see a lot of delineation, which is South of Heaven is a very slow, plodding, heavy, menacing, but slow song for Slayer. And to come off Rain and Blood, which is literally 10 songs, 29 minutes, it's blisteringly fast. And they go, what do we do next? And they go, let's just make a really slow opener song, but like make it as heavy and menacing as possible. And what can be said about South of Heaven, the song? It's iconic. It literally sounds like you're being like on a freight elevator, just going into hell, like being lowered into hell with the boom, boom, doo, doo, doo. And yeah, it's weird because you'll start to gauge very quickly. I love fast Slayer. I love slow Slayer, but like I fucking love fast Slayer. And it's not fast Slayer at all, and yet I still love it. Where versus War Ensemble is fast Slayer. It comes out and it just hits, it annihilates. And just like what a sick opener is War Ensemble, as is South of Heaven. But like War Ensemble, another thing we'll get into is how much I love Slayer lyrics, even though they're kind of basic and kind of at times kind of hokey in their like, oh, look at us, we're so edgy, we're so satanic, when none of them really are. Like they do it for the views, really. But sometimes they write songs and I'm just like, man, that's so sick. And then when Tom Araya like delivers them, Like in South of Heaven, when he says, "Before you see the light, you must die," and he like
Yeah.
screams, and it's just like it just all comes crashing down at once. It's just sick. It's just awesome. But again, I'm partial to Fast Slayer, and this is literally like a percentage more on this side than the other. But at the end of the day, I think I would actually give this to War Ensemble. And for me, it's just the speed, the ferocity, and as an opener for an album, I think South of Heaven is more interesting. Like, it's like, oh, what is this? Whereas War Ensemble's like, let's just go 100 miles per hour right out of the gate. And it's just, I just had to slightly give the edge there.
So, as you were talking, for everybody listening, this episode is going to come out a week late. I had a series of job-related things that kind of blew me out of the water, and doing the listening today to get ready for this episode, just to make sure I had all my thoughts in place, I realized that I'm going through Slayer fatigue, because all these songs kind of kick ass, but eventually loud guitar sounds like loud guitar, and Tom Araya sounds like Tom Araya. So I'm going to let this be Mike Kane weeps for Slayer, because in my stance, one of these records is just better. But I think that this is a beautiful opportunity to let somebody who has a lifelong attachment to these speak from the heart about how much this kicks ass. So for me, out of these two, War Ensemble takes it, because I am only in the camp that Fast Slayer fucking kills. And South of Heaven is a very, very good song, and I think it's a bold choice following Raining Blood. I don't think that there is a comparison, though, because once War Ensemble starts, it doesn't stop. And I am a fan of what I like to say, the endurance of music. Whoever is playing that guitar, I don't know if it's Carrie or if it's Jeff, holy shit, their forearm must be made of like obsidian. They are going. I read this review a very long time ago. It might have actually been, now that I recollect, it might have been in the Rolling Stone book, the top 500 greatest albums of all time, and it was about Raining Blood, and it was like 7 words. It just said Slayer hit Mach 5. Slayer hit Mach 5, and then they didn't stop, and that's always stuck in my mind, because in modern music today, we've got triggers, we've got samples, we got things that you can kind of utilize to make things sound quicker. But just like old school bodybuilding, there wasn't any hiding this. You know, they played it that fast in the studio, without edits, without a computer assisting them. And I think that, War Ensemble just comes out, and it's like a I don't know, man. I imagine it's like what getting hit by the General Lee would feel like. It's just like, holy fuck, I'm dead. All right.
It's like a cannonball's coming at you, and you have 2 seconds to react.
Yeah.
It's like that's how fast it's coming. Like, oh man.
War Ensemble. Okay, here's a good way to describe it. War Ensemble feels like if you've ever had a dream where you're walking in a dark tunnel, and then all of a sudden it's just a train, but you didn't hear the train, you didn't feel the train, you didn't smell the train coming. You just look in an, oh shit, bright light, and you're dead.
Yeah.
Whereas South of Heaven is very good. I love the riff. Like Mike said, the section when Tom does that really gnarly scream, and then everything comes down, I got a good kick out of. But War Ensemble made me want to move my entire apartment building. Pick it up.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, like, I have people in my life, my partner, my parents, some of my friends who are like, why do you like this kind of music? Like, it's too fast. It's too aggressive. It's too, like, noise driven. I'm just like, I don't know how listening to a song like War Ensemble doesn't affect you in some way. Like, I'll just go, I was going to say this at some point, but you know, that question you often get was like, what's the dream concert you would go to if you could revive a band and like pull them from the dead or back out of retirement and just see them at any point in their career? For me, my number one go-to is Slayer post Seasons in the Abyss. So Decade of Aggression tour, when they're just doing material from the first 5 albums. Like, I mean, obviously they're retired now, so they'll never play this stuff again. But like War Ensemble in the like post South of Heaven Slayer, their age, their ferocity, their energy, and War Ensemble comes on. Like, how am I not going to mosh? How am I not
Right.
going to headbang and like twist my neck, like get whipped? Like, how am I not going to do that? How am I just going to stand there and just like quietly listen and be like, yeah, this is great. Like, I just don't get it. Whereas, you know, South of Heaven, like I said, it's a beautiful, well, maybe not beautiful. It's very haunting. It's very good. War Ensemble, just like, I would twist my neck to it. That's how much I love it. And I think I have before. Like, I think I've thrown out like a muscle in my neck before to War Ensemble and a couple of these other songs, which we'll get to. So War Ensemble takes it. I just want to reiterate here quickly. Did you say that you think one of these albums is much better or just better?
Yeah,
much better.
Much better.
Okay, don't spoil it, but I'm very interested to hear what it is as we progress.
Yeah.
So next matchup for South of Heaven is Silent Scream, and for Seasons in the Abyss, it is Blood Red. Would you like to start this one?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. All right. Do you want me to start all of them?
I do. I think that I imagine eventually this will transition onto my side, and one day we might do Dark Side of the Moon versus Wish You Were Here. We might do Dark Side versus Animals, or one of those.
We'll figure it out.
But I think that right now, because Mike, you came up with this idea, you have done all the legwork. You allow me to come in and discuss these records with you. And I think that, like I said, this is a very wonderful time for you to just express how much these records mean to you. But it doesn't have to be some kind of sappy deal. Like one of my favorite movies of all time is Roadhouse. It's not because it's a beautiful story. It's a kick-ass movie. You know, I don't need some character study. I don't need Skinamarink. No, dude. Patrick Swayze fucking spin kicking people. I'm here for it. Yeah. Thank you.
It's like 300. It's just like a dude's movie, and it's great.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's got no deep message. It's just ripped dudes killing people.
That's it. Like
that's Slayer. It's just what it is, and I love it. I love every second of it.
Yeah, and as much as I could speak on these, and I'll interject in times like, no, dude, this means the fucking world to you. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, here's my authorian opinion. Nah.
Well, and I appreciate that, Cody. And this is very much like I love talking about Slayer because I feel like not enough people love Slayer. Like, I feel like they should. It's one of those things. But I also definitely want your views because you made that comment that one of these albums is better. I'm like, man, what does he think is much better than the other one? But as we progress, like I said, we'll get to that. So as far as this matchup is concerned, they almost take the opposite approach of the first cracks, which is South of Heaven is slow. Silent Scream is fast, dude. It's just like, and one thing I love about Silent Scream is that they end South of Heaven with the feedback on the guitar and it just goes forever. Yep. It's like, it's long and it's like, man, why aren't they cutting this off? And then you just hear the cymbals starting and you're like, oh shit. And then bam, just like coming with Silent Scream.
Yeah.
Like, oh yes. Perfect. Also, again, Slayer lyrics can be hokey, but to do a song called Silent Scream and talk just like so openly, disgustingly about abortion. I mean, Silent Scream, crucify bastard child, ripped and torn, sacrifice the unborn. It's like, God damn, dude. Like what? And Jeff Hanneman, who was one of the guitar players of Slayer, wrote the majority of the lyrics for Slayer's much of their career. And you just think, God, what was he thinking? Like, how did he think about that? And how did he build that and possess that? Versus Blood Red, which, unlike War Ensemble, is a slower song. And actually, I think Blood Red, now I'm looking at the whole track list for Seasons, I think Blood Red is actually my least favorite on Seasons.
Oh.
One, it comes after War Ensemble, which is like, you're not really going to get much better. But it's cool. I love Blood Red. Like, I wouldn't take it off the album, but if I had to pick one to remove, it would be Blood Red. It's just kind of like, it's good. Again, I love it, but it's kind of just like Slayer on autopilot, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Which again, I still love Slayer on autopilot, but it's one of those songs where I'm like, yeah, okay. Not to spoil, but I think it's sandwiched in between two amazing songs. So here for me, Blood Red just kind of doesn't quite do it for Seasons. And then when you compare it to Silent Scream, which is actually one of my favorite songs off South of Heaven, it's really no contest. So I have to give it to Silent Scream here.
Yeah, just like I said with War Ensemble, and Mike mentioned that swell of the feedback, and then the cymbals. The Silent Scream hits like it's like the crack of a 22, but you don't know where it's coming from. It just hit, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah. And this starts, in my opinion, South of Heaven putting Seasons in the Abyss in a rear naked chokehold. Yeah.
You think South is better? Are you for? Oh,
1,000,000%. And
oh my god. Oh my.
Yeah, and
Cody.
Then yeah, and it just for as much as we can disassemble these songs and really like look down into it. My basis for heavy metal music doesn't make me giggle from how ridiculous it is. And every single song on South of Heaven at one point made me chuckle from the way that the riffs kick in. And whereas Season in the Abyss, I was like, yeah, these are banging songs, but man, I very rarely did like the metalhead like, oh, what is this? So I have to give it to Silent Scream on this guy.
Woo. Okay. See, I was like, because I gave that anecdote early on when we were backstage, and you said South of Heaven, like immediately said South of Heaven. I'm like, man, after listening to these records again, maybe he changed his opinion, and you did not. You think South of Heaven is much better. God damn, Cody. All right. Well, this is going to be a title cage fight here, because I'll go ahead and spoil. I think Seasons is way better than South of Heaven. And as we progress through these tracks, I'll explain why. But okay, interesting. So you give it the Silent Scream, though?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then each one has 1 for 1. So next up, and again, this is funny how these match up, is Live Undead on South versus Spirits in Black in Season. And it's funny because both these songs follow a structural mold, which is the first half is slower, and then the second half is like blistering. And with Live Undead, it's cool. Love the like, it's just cool. Something about Tom Araya on Slayer riffs and Lombardo beats are just awesome.
Oh yeah.
And in Live Undead, it's like really cool that Tom's doing this stuff. I will say, it's been mentioned before in Slayer conversations, and I think it's totally true. I think his bass is just nowhere to be found in any of these records, and I think that's really unfortunate. There's moments where you'll hear him like barrel like a note or something, but like you never really hear the bass in Slayer. Which again is unfortunate, but that's just what it is. And the second half of Live Undead, when it really kicks in, is also sick, insane. But in particular, the last like 10 seconds of Live Undead, where it's just Lombardo going down the toms, and then Lombardo goes down the toms, and Tom just goes Live Undead, and then you just go oh, it's so sick every time. And I cannot help but air drum every time that comes on. And then just dead. Like it's so good. But here's the thing. Spirits in Black might be my favorite song on Seasons in the Abyss. And here's why.
You're out of your mind.
It does this. No, here's why. It does the same thing, right? It does the slower half and then the faster half. One thing that I'll also say is very true about Slayer, and you hear this brought up a lot in Slayer conversations, and it's totally true. When it comes to guitar solos, Slayer lacks. They do. It's one of two things. It's either just a lot of fast notes, just right, or it's just like a lot of weird. That's a lot of Slayer solos boiled down to their bass components. But in a rare times, you'll have Slayer actually give a pretty cool, pretty interesting melodic guitar solo. And you have that in the first guitar solo in Spirits in Black, where, again, I can't recite it offhandedly, but like, if you listen to Spirits in Black and the melody it's playing, and then the guitar solo is like doing an inversion on the melody, it's very cool. Also, I think that the first half of Spirits in Black is just cooler than Live Undead with the.
You were out of your mind, dude.
Well, I'll give you the floor in 1 second because I have to finish up with. So when Live Undead goes to the faster stuff, right? It's cool. In Spirits in Black, when you go from the slow part to the fast part, and you just you hear Tom go Spirits in Black tilde, and then you hear and then Dave goes boom dum 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 dum. Oh, and then I think it's Carrie comes in with the and then all that stuff is so fucking sick. And then when the whole band comes back in with Tom, and you just got Dave going crazy, you got Jeff and Carrie going crazy. It's like it's moments like that why I love Slayer. Again, these are hard matchups, and both these songs are killer. But for me, Spirits in Black is like a top 5 Slayer track for me. Like, it's that good.
Yeah, that's how I feel about Live Undead. The so like I just said, a lot of my judgment on metal music is how much can this make me giggle, but in like a really healthy way, not like, oh, this is stupid, just in a, man, this is awesome. And legitimately, the second that Live Undead kicks into that, I was like big cheesing. I was smiling ear to ear because, yeah, when the drums and the bass come in, they're not doing a lot. They're just accenting like the 1 and the 4 essentially. And I was like, yeah, this is what this should be. I think Slayer gets a lot of flack because they never got unserious. Like, they never kind of got like goofy. Or like some bands, Megadeth has always been kind of a little silly. Anthrax is like is like always throwing spitballs, and Metallica got safe. Slayer though, like, yeah, God hates us all. Okay, yeah, we get it. You guys are dead serious. And man, there's just something about the way Tom is singing in this song. The guitar solo, in my opinion, is fantastic. The way that they do that little speed up is cool. But it always sticks with me, just that little, them going back to that, and it makes me think about being alive in, like, if I was alive in 1980, and if I had to go through the whole like satanic panic deal, and people be like, this is satanic music, and it's like, listen to this. Like, one of these dudes is like openly Catholic,
Yeah.
like, right. Stop being upset. Look at one Iron Maiden album cover. How are you gonna think that that's gonna make me go do like evil things? It's a fucking it's a mummy running around,
Yeah, pulling the strings of Satan.
Yeah,
which is like, one, it's sick, but like,
yeah, like I don't know. I just, every time I've heard Live Undead and going back and listening to it today, it did the exact same thing. That riff started and I just giggled. Where Spirit in Black is a fantastic song. I just think that Live Undead did the format better, or that did that structure better.
Sure.
Yeah.
I also want to say with Live Undead, I'm still giving it to, I can't not give it to Spirits in Black, but the part where it goes from slow to fast, where Tom goes, it is time to die. Like, it's just sick, dude. And then he ends up screaming, they all come in. I don't know how people don't like this kind of music, but obviously we're the wrong people to ask because we love it.
Well, you know what I think it is? Because I've put a lot of thought into this. I'm somebody who tries to be culturally open to most things, as long as it's not something that is like inherently evil. Like, if you come up to me and you're like, my favorite band is like Screwdriver, get out of here, you're a Nazi, stop fucking talking to me, I think so many people got wrapped up into the Nancy Reagan this is evil identity that they never sat down and just looked at it. Because let's be honest here. Silent Scream, like you said, is a song about abortion. I would say to half of America, especially in the 80s, especially in the 90s, some of them sat on that, I think it is the disservice of people who were unwilling to let themselves experience new things. And I think that they just let themselves sit in fear. Because like Black Sabbath, yeah, that's a scary sounding name. But like later on, they wrote Changes. That's a beautiful song. Or like Dio. Like, oh wow, Rainbow in the Dark is like a satanic song. Yo, Ronnie James Dio was like a pretty open religious man.
Yeah.
Like, stop I think people get so wrapped up in what they think something is, that they never allow themselves to experience the joy of like a drop D blistering guitar riff.
Yeah.
You know?
And Slayer never had that like changes, that like beautiful
Mm-hmm.
moment. They were always Slayer to their core, which is funny because it goes to the next song of how like everyone believes they're like actually satanic. Behind the Crooked Cross is definitely not a religious sanctimonious song. It's
No.
very much like religious, like crusades, religious warfare type, like we're killing in the name of God kind of thing. And again, it's just sick. Like the lyrics are sick on this song.
Yeah.
Versus Expendable Youth, which is, I believe, about the Hitler Youth and how like Germany during World War II sent in like 13-year-olds and 14-year-olds to go fight for the Nazi regime.
Yeah.
So 2 commentaries on war here. You know, sometimes this is why I wish you would go first, but
okay,
because it's in a moment where I'm stuck here, but maybe I'll hear what you have to say.
Sorry, give me 1 second. My poor cat has become incredibly vocal over the last like 2 months, especially when we started doing this podcast. And so I think she just wants to. She has an episode about like I don't know, kitty metal.
Oh, yeah.
I honestly, in my opinion, this is kind of where season with Expendable Youth. I like Expendable Youth more lyrically. I think Behind the Crooked Cross though is more fun.
Mhm.
And also too, this is such a personal bias thing. My last name is Constantine, and there was this very strange period in my life where I don't know why, but I took personal ownership of the Crusades. Because I was like, it's my name. It's falling in what I assume is my bloodline down the years. And anytime the Crusades get brought up in like media, I get like a little upset because I'm like, oh, that sucks that I'm kind of attached to that.
Mm.
But yeah, the Hitler Youth song wins out on this one.
All right, interesting. Because I'm kind of, again, I'm very close, but I'm kind of going towards Behind the Crooked Cross. And the reason why is because I think my one issue, I mean, I have some, but one of my issues with Seasons in the Abyss is that Expendable Youth, the opening of the Expendable Youth and Skeletons in Society, it sounds like literally the same intro to both.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're both doing like a quarter note downbeat, like boom, boom, boom. It's a different riff, but it sounds so similar that when I first started listening to Slayer, I'm like, did I just repeat the same song? Like, did I just go back? But I didn't. So I think that's a little, they could have done something different with one of those songs in the intro. And Behind the Crooked Cross, you get a gnarly Lombardo beat, which if listeners out there don't know Lombardo beats, it's very ride heavy. It's like a
yeah.
If you want an example of this that's isolated, listen to Criminally Insane off Rain and Blood. The first like 10 seconds. It's just peak Lombardo beat. And the Lombardo beat with what they're doing in the opener of Behind the Crooked Cross, I think is really cool. There's also that moment later in when it's right before the solo where, again, Tom goes, Crooked Cross, and then you just hear boom, and they just like come in with the solo again. It's those Slayer moments that are just like fucking sick. So even though it's not by a landslide for which one I'm going for, I think I get the slight edge to Behind the Crooked Cross here.
That's fair. And, I think, too, it is incredible at how good Slayer was at this point. Like, how tight they were at doing those speed-ups, and then also kind of knowing when to be like, hey, man, let's pull it back. Let's make this section just fucking kick. Just make it headbang, make it sick. Like, and I think it's really cool holding that lineage, and then you get to something later down the road where it's like Pantera, with, in my opinion, the top 3 greatest breakdowns of all time with like Domination, where it's like, yeah, you can hear the Slayer in this, boys.
Oh yeah,
you know where that came from. All right, so
and we'll definitely get to breakdowns here soon.
Oh yeah.
Here's a really okay. Now I'm really fascinated to hear what you have to say about this next one, because again, structurally speaking, they do a similar thing, which is they get basically like maybe not their slowest songs on the record, but in the case of Seasons, it's definitely the slowest, which is on South of Heaven. You got Mandatory Suicide versus Dead Skin Mask off of Seasons in the Abyss. Two very popular songs, two very not fast songs, obviously. And it's funny to me how often people talk about Mandatory Suicide, but they don't talk about Dead Skin Mask. Because I think both of them are like really great slower Slayer songs, just like heavy, doomful, slow Slayer, which they do well when they do it well. But here's the thing, and I've gotten flack for this for years. I don't think Mandatory Suicide is a classic Slayer song. It's just not. And Cody, this isn't playing visually, but Cody just gave me stank face as if I'm out of my mind. But let me explain. It's just kind of boring. I'm sorry. It's just like the riff is really cool. But something about Tom's approach to this song and how he's just, going about doing it. It's a song about, going to war is mandatory suicide, where you're enlisting and you're going to die. Like, it's just choosing suicide, basically. And we said earlier that Slayer rarely does like hokey moments with their lyrics, but I really think that the moment where it's the chorus and he's just going suicide, doom, 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 suicide, like that's so fucking hokey to me. Like, I think Slayer should have just let the riff speak for itself. And other lyrical moments in Mandatory Suicide are really good, but that like really just like, it's something Megadeth would do, right? And nothing against Megadeth, I love them, but like that's just something that Dave would be like, yeah, this is cool. And then for Tom to go like, yeah, we're going to do this. I'm like, I don't know. It's just, it's not really my jam in that moment. But as opposed to Dead Skin Mask, which I'll have to make the illusion that if I was walking down an alleyway, like a dark alleyway at night, and I looked forward and saw a silhouette there and Dead Skin Mask started playing, I would literally pee my pants and probably die of fright, because Dead Skin Mask is so like hauntingly scary. Like, it's just like, of course it's about Ed Gein and what he did, which if you don't know, Ed Gein, famous serial killer, would often take the skin and wear the face of people as a mask. So Dead Skin Mask, just like disturbing, gross, sick song. Again, it's weird to say it's a sick song when that's the subject matter, but like the sound of it is amazing. The Dance with the Dead in My Dreams chorus is so good. And then you have the kid in the end when he's just like repeating the chorus, and you have the kid going, I'm done, Mr. Gein, like, let me out, let me. And it's just like, oh, it's so like, oh God, it's so creepy. It's so haunting. And then they end the song with the guitar feedback, just like 20 seconds of just feedback. And it's like, man, he just killed that kid. And he's probably chopping him up right now. It's like one of those feelings. I feel more when I listen to Dead Skin Mask than I do Mandatory Suicide. So for me, it's Dead Skin.
Mike, you just changed my mind on this,
Ooh.
on how I had this ranked.
Ooh,
Mandatory Suicide is a very, very good song. And I like Tom or I saying Mandatory Suicide because I think that's a very funny line. And also the riff, made me giggle, but
killer riff for sure.
But Dead Skin Mask, I mean, let's be honest, that's a fucking song title, dude. That's a gnarly song title, man. Jesus. But when you talk about that section with the kid at the end, it's like, Dead Skin Mask pulls out the W on this one.
And like I said, the choice to have the feedback, and in my mind, it really was the choice of like, yeah, he just killed that kid. Like, that kid's dead. Like, I truly feel that's what they did in doing that.
Yeah. And, speaking on Ed Gein and songs that are about, I guess media that's about people who have committed these kind of like unthinkable, horrendous acts. I think that there is a level of understanding that Slayer did with this song, where it's not about the, I guess, the bizarre underlying like appreciation of Ed Gein and like the modern culture of like, oh, what a twisted mind, that's beautiful. I think they're like, that's a fucked up dude.
Yeah,
shit's kind of crazy, man. Like, and I don't know. That's something that I've always had like a hot take issue with in the last decade, is kind of the this bizarre interest in these awful people.
Well, what's funny is that, I mean, it's not funny, but Slayer literally on Divine Intervention did a Jeffrey Dahmer song called
Yeah.
213. Like they went back to the well of like serial killers. And I think again, it's a difficult subject matter because it's about a real person who did horrific things, but goddamn, if it's not a cool song, like sorry, like I if I have to be that person, but like Dead Skin Mass 213, they're about these horrific people, and yet like I sing along to it. I'm sorry to
Yeah.
say, like it's just kind of sick. Um, which I don't know if it's awareness for. I feel like Slayer's doing it just because like it is like horrific. It is such dark subject matter. I don't think they're doing it to raise awareness or anything like that, but
No.
maybe they are. I don't know. I could be totally wrong.
I don't know. I mean, everybody except for Jeff is still alive. Which,
Right.
okay, now that we're at Dead Skin Mask, let's talk about that real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff Hanneman dying of, what was it? Essentially leprosy.
Well, apparently it was a spider bite that led to like a skin disease, and that's like a leprosy type thing, which he died from.
What a fucking Slayer way to die.
Oh yeah.
What an on-brand way to die.
Which it's really unfortunate because I mean, you know, you don't want anyone to die. And we were talking about Cormac McCarthy and how, you know, legends in their sort of genre die. I mean, Jeff kind of was a legend of his thrash metal genre, and I really believe that Jeff's death led to the end of Slayer.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate because I love Slayer, but you're right. It's like, man, you could have picked any way to like die, and you died on such a Slayer note.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those deals where it's like, I guess not the karma, but like the irony of the world is so funny. Mm-hmm. Where it's like you spent what, 20 years kicking ass and absolutely taking everybody's name by being like an incredible songwriter and like touching on these like tough topics or these like controversial things. And it's like, well, man, the man comes for everybody. You know, you're not going comfortably.
Right.
Oh, well.
It's great. It's a scary world.
A very scary world.
So that ends side one of both records. Slow and plodding. And then Slayer goes, well, clearly we have to kick it up a notch. So both side two records begin with very fast songs. And that for the case of South, that's Ghosts of War. In the case of Seasons, that's Hallowed Point. This might be the most difficult matchup for me, believe it or not. Now again, Cody's shaking his head saying no, so I'm interested to hear what he thinks, but hear me out. Both these songs are killer. Both these songs are fast. They hit you in the face. And what's interesting about Ghosts of War is that it actually opens with the outro to Chemical Warfare, which is another Slayer song and one of my favorite Slayer songs. For some reason, they open the song with the closing of Chemical Warfare. And at first I'm like, man, that's weird that they're doing that. But then it's like slightly quieter. So you're like, man, why is it quieter? So you turn up the dial and you're like, what am I hearing? And then they come in with the full speed, loud Ghosts of War. And you're like, you get blown back. You're like, oh my God. And again, cool song, cool lyrics. I was going to say I like Tom's performance better on Ghosts of War, but now I'm not sure because Hallowed Point is actually one of my favorite Slayer like deep cuts. It's one they never play live or never played live at this point. And I can see why. It's not like an infamous Slayer song, but man, does it just like kick ass, especially after Dead Skin Mask. And the part after the chorus where Dave is like hitting the crash and then muffling it as he hits it. Just the boom, 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 like, again, it's a moment where I just air drum immediately. Like I can't not air drum to that. And it was funny. I was playing these records on my turntable the other day because I'm lucky enough to own every Slayer vinyl on record, which I love that. But that's just a me thing. And Savannah was with me, my partner, and I was playing some of Seasons, and she just happened to be in the room. And I'm like, "All right, you ready?" And she's like, "What?" And I was like, Hallowed Point's about to come on. I'm about to mosh this bitch. And so literally, you've been to my house, you know, like the room she has that's like wide open.
Yeah.
Hallowed Point starts and I just start like throwing empty boxes around and just like kicking things. It's one of those things where you're like, how am I not going to move to this? Which admittedly, Ghosts of War is that too. And I think they're both great. So rather than make a decision now, I'd like to hear what you think and maybe it'll sway me.
I think Hallowed Point is good. I don't really have too much to say about it. I think that it's Fast Slayer doing Fast Slayer. I just think that Ghosts of War kind of does it better. The intro, very much, yeah, feels like a shit post where it's like, oh yeah. And it's like the mix of it too, where it's like everything's super muffled, super flat. And then
Yep.
you're like, all right, did my speakers break? I got to turn the volume up. And then when everything kicks in, but they're playing at such high speed that it is like almost impenetrable to make sense of what's happening for the first like 10 seconds because they are like flying through these fucking riffs and it's so
Hmm.
cool. And this is actually have written in my note, this is where I started getting Slayer fatigue
I can believe
because
it.
it's like holy shit, you guys are playing so fast. And the one downfall that I think early like golden era heavy metal has is that their insistence of making things so heavy took away the chance for like slight expiration.
Hmm.
So like when you go back to like um episode 2 with Black Sabbath, having Embryo and having Orchid was nice
Yep.
because it's not just drop D guitar riff, which is still cool, don't get me wrong, but man, by this point I felt like I was in a fog, which I guess is good for Slayer because I was like, holy shit, this is just so it's so much Slayer right now.
Hmm.
So at this point, I almost started acting just entirely animalistically, where Ghost of War just hit me harder. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
if I'm picking, I'm picking.
And one thing too, Ghost of War has that or excuse me, not Spirits in Black. Hallowed Point doesn't. Is it has a killer breakdown. That breakdown that comes like
Yeah.
midway through Ghost of War is sick. And then the ending with Tom just going, "I deal in pain," and just like the way he's like enunciating everything, and then rise, Ghosts of War, and it just ends. It's like, man, that's just so cool. It's just so cool.
This
Um,
is actually, I do have a funny note. This song, for some reason, at one point, Tom Araya sounds like Dexter Holland from The Offspring. And
no,
once I
yeah,
heard it, I literally went, oh no, I'm not going to be able to unhear this.
yeah, right.
And it then put a very funny image in my mind of The Offspring playing, but it's Tom Araya instead of instead of Dexter Holland, and I got a good giggle out of me because like that'd be a trip to see.
Yeah, hopefully I don't hear that now that I know that,
I'm
but
sorry.
we'll
I'm
see.
sorry
You know
for
what? That's okay. I'll give it to Ghost of War just for the breakdown and the way it ends the song. Again, I love Hallowed Point, but maybe Ghost of War just has slightly more interesting stuff going on.
yeah.
Which leads to another interesting matchup in my opinion, which is Read Between the Lies versus Skeletons of Society. I can make this one pretty quick, which is Read Between the Lies is some of my favorite Slayer lyrics. It's talking about how, pastors and priests use religion as a thing of like, hey, let's all come together, when in reality they use it to like their benefit and only their benefit, not the actual populace who are attending these. And as someone who, you know, had religious youth, like youth, and I was religious, and then when I got older, I kind of like turned away from it for a lot of these reasons.
Yeah.
I really connect with it. But for me, it's actually my least favorite song on South of Heaven, and that's only because I think the riffs and the instrumentation is just kind of dull, especially after Ghost of War and other songs on this record. It just is not one I really like. Even sitting here now, I know it, like I know the song, but I'm struggling to think of every moment of the song. Like I know the main riff, and that's about it. Like I couldn't tell you what the drums are doing. I couldn't tell you what really anything else going on other than the lyrics. Whereas Skeletons of Society, now again, it has that expendable youth intro, which I think they really could have done something different. But once the riff kicks in, that it's like, again, it's one of those riffs, that slower Slayer riff, where I'm just like, I'm moving, I'm banging my head, I'm kicking things over, I don't care what it is. And again, a Tom performance when he does the Skeletons of Society, like it's just the way he's enunciating it is so sick, especially the moment he does it and then the instrumentation cuts out when he says society. for me, it's easy. At least this one is. It's Skeletons for me.
Yeah, I was going to agree with you. I think Read Between the Lies is very good. I just think that Skeletons of Society feels like they tried more.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's hard to find something to say, but I think that Read Between the Lies is, it's like my least favorite song on South of Heaven. And having a least favorite song on a record is really hard, because even if you prefer that record, it's like, do I prefer that song over Skeletons of Society? But I just think at the end of the day, Skeletons is better. And if it was up to me, if I were God, I would have just combined these two records and cut some of the flack.
Well, that's the thing for me, is that I say things like Blood Red is my least favorite on Seasons, and I say things like Read Between the Lies is my least favorite on South, but I wouldn't cut either of them. I still love them. I still think they're great. It's just like, obviously something has to be the weakest, and for me, those moments are the weakest on the record.
Yeah.
Especially when Read Between the Lies is followed up by Cleanse the Soul, which, again, it's another deep cut Slayer track. They never really played it live, but man, might be the fastest song on South of Heaven.
Yeah.
Maybe Silent Scream's faster, but like, to go from, okay, I'm kind of, Read Between the Lies, I'm kind of over it, like we can move on now, and then Cleanse the Soul, like, oh yeah, here we go. And like, I'm suddenly at 100 miles per hour again, and I'm starting to throw boxes and kick things like I was on Hallowed Point. Cleanse the Soul is sick. I love this song, and I wish that it got more popularity and more people were behind it, because I think it's really one of the best songs on South of Heaven. Again, I understand why it's a deep cut, because you can't really compete against South of Heaven the track, or Silent Scream the track, or, again, not my opinion, but Mandatory Suicide the track. Versus Temptation, which might be the deepest cut on Seasons in the Abyss. I don't think they ever touched this song after Seasons. Like, it's just like, I think a lot of Slayer fans forgot this song even existed. But again, I think Temptation's really cool. It does a hokey thing where they're echoing the lyrics, where Tom says the lyrics and then it echoes the lyric. And I'm like, okay, it's, I accept it because it's Slayer, but like, another band would do this, and I'm like, I'm not for this at all. Like, again, it feels like something Megadeth would do.
Yeah.
But man, that breakdown in Temptation is fucking sick. Like, I'm just like, again, it's a throw my neck out moment.
Yeah.
Like, it's just sick. Fuck. Like, I don't know which, again, I'm sitting here going like, I'm not sure which one I choose. I think I'm leaning towards Cleanse the Soul here. I don't know. What do you think?
Cleanse the Soul beat it out for me, because there's a cool little 3/4 section at the end. And everybody in the band locks into this drum thing that Dave's doing, where it's like, it's probably like 3 minutes in, and it's just this like 6 bars of 3/4. And it perked me up, because I was like, oh, whoa, where did this time signature come? Whereas Temptation was good. It just felt lackluster. Like, it just kind of felt like some things are deep cuts, because maybe they are good as the artist attempt, but not good let me figure out a way to say this. Good.
Well, I think one thing that maybe is said here is that Temptation feels like an album filler.
Yeah.
Like, we need 10 songs, we're at 9, what can we do? And then they
Yeah.
just kind of wrote Temptation in an hour, and it's like, okay, this will work.
Yeah. That's kind of...
Is that what you're trying to get at? Okay.
Yeah. Where it's like, I'm glad they did it, but it doesn't scratch the Slayer itch for me. Yeah. And number 9, though, is a very, very interesting matchup.
So, if I may, this is what I wanted to allude to, which Temptation, I think you're right. It does feel like that's the last song that was on Seasons, because they didn't know what else to put on it. Like, they had all the other 9, and they're like, okay, we need one more.
Yeah.
And they went with Temptation. So it's like a track filler. But I'll take that any day over a cover song on your main track listing. So here's my tirade. I fucking hate when bands do this. Now, if I may say prior to this, I think their cover of Distant Aggressor is really cool. There are times where I like it more than the Judas Priest version.
Yeah.
But do not put covers on your main track list. Like, do a B-side, I'm cool with that. Have a bonus track, cool. Don't put it in the middle of your album. Megadeth did this on their first 3 albums, and I hate it. Metallica never did it, which I'm glad. They had a whole covers album, which is I think is the correct version. And Slayer only did this once, which was here. But like, why? Like, were you really that like? Did you really want 10 tracks that badly that you had to throw a cover in?
Here's my argument. Before we go any further, let's have this argument right now. I think that this works because this isn't like a basic layer Judas Priest song. This isn't like top 5 Priests. This feels like when you go see a band. Okay, like Converge has that Disintegration cover, and it's fucking 13 minutes long, and it's like them rearranging Disintegration by The Cure into just this like, it's like drop a fucking rip. You're dead afterwards, and I think it works. Because it feels like Slayer showing appreciation for a band they like, instead of being like, oh, it's like the easy cover. It'd be like if you went and saw Train and they covered Raining in Baltimore by the Counting Crows. It's like, okay, deeper cut. I get it. It fits the vibe. And personally, if you didn't know that this was a Judas Priest song, I think it's better than Born of Fire. If you put the two up together, I think this song is better. It made me walk around the room. Like, that's the only way I can describe it. Like, I was like, oh, this fucking rips. And then I was listening to it, I was like, this is a Judas Priest song.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that as somebody who has been in bands who have done the whole, like, let's do a cover, there's 2 ways to do it. There's, I'm a shithead and I want the cheap pop of like, oh man, breaking the law. And then there is, I grew up listening to this. Like, this meant something to me and it put me here. So let's throw it in at the end, kind of as like a secret. It's like an Easter egg. And also too, it still fucking rips,
I totally agree that it's a great cover. Like I said, there's days where I think it's better than the Judas Priest version of the song. And I appreciate that it's not, Electric Eye or it's not Painkiller. Like big, like I appreciate they went deeper with it. But like, you had 3 albums before this and an EP where you just didn't do covers. And now all of a sudden on your 4th, you just want this cover in here. And then they don't do it ever again after this. So I'm like, why did you even do this? Like, I would rather take a Temptation where you just think of something and it's quick. And maybe it's not the best song in the album, but it's something, than literally going, we've got nothing. Let's just do a cover of a song.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's such a cheap way out of it. So that's my first issue with Distant Aggressor. I love it. I think it's a really cool song, and I love it as a cover. I just don't love it as a track on South of Heaven. If it was a bonus track or a B-side, sure, no problem. I'm fine with that. But you said this is better than Born of Fire.
100%.
No, dude. Born of Fire fucking rips. Like, it just like tears limbs.
Oh, I'm not saying it doesn't rip. I'm just saying that it doesn't rip as much as this Judas Priest cover.
Well, the thing too is that you've got a slow song versus a fast song here, which, and again, I'm partial to Fast Slayer personally, but like Born of Fire is sick. And again, it's one of those deeper cut tracks where they just didn't really, I mean, they did play this live sometimes, but like, one thing I love about Born of Fire and a lot of Slayer is that like, you hear a song title by Slayer and it's going to be like, oh, it feels like the devil is speaking of how he was born of fire and then he's going to like disintegrate the world. But then you have other bands like Metallica, for example. They had a song called Jump in the Fire on their first album. And it's a song about, the devil. And he's like, yeah, jump in the fire, come to hell, whatever. And you listen to it, you're like, man, this is so poppy. It's so like upbeat that I'm like, this doesn't feel like, it doesn't feel like the devil speaking to me. It doesn't feel hell at all. And Born of Fire, you're like, yeah, I feel like I'm in the middle of hell right now, like on fire right now. And it's Fast Slayer doing Fast Slayer, but I think it's Fast Slayer doing Fast Slayer well. And the whole cover, I just can't get behind the whole cover thing on a mainline track. So for me, it's Born on Fire.
Well, then I will agree with you. It is Born on Fire on the merit that it is an original composition instead of a rearrangement of a favorite song.
We don't have to agree, Cody. It's okay if we don't.
Well, no, but I think that you're correct in a lot of the sense. I just think as a fan of the overall pot, it works for me better. But as a Slayer song, instead of instead of five dudes who like the music, Born on Fire is better.
And one thing this is a little bit of a tangent, but one thing they did on Rain and Blood is one of their bonus tracks was Aggressive Perfector, which was a song they did on Show No Mercy, their first album. They just redid it basically. And it's a bonus track, so it's not on the main track list, but as a bonus track, you're like, man, this is cool. And because it's your guys' song, I wouldn't feel bad if this was on one of the main track lists. I wish they would have done something like that, where if they went with the Haunting the Chapel EP and did like a redo of Chemical Warfare, for example, as a ninth track, like that would have been awesome. I don't know why they didn't go that route and instead went, let's just do a cover of a Judas Priest song. Like it still boggles my mind to this day.
You know what I bet happened? This is such a deep thought. I bet that they were all jamming at like the writing sessions, and Rick Rubin came in and was like, "Oh, that's cool. What is that?" And they were probably like, "Oh, that's Dissident Aggressor by Judas Priest." And he was probably like, "You should just do it. Just throw it on there." And I think that there's some kind of you see this happen a lot in hardcore bands. Like you listen to a hardcore band's first record and it'll be 8 original songs and then like a Minor Threat cover, or it'll be like a Title Fight cover, and it's like, that's cool, and I think it works. I just think for the format of this podcast, it has to be the Slayer song. It can't be the Judas Priest song.
And the thing too is that they literally did a covers album later in their career. They did Undisputed Attitude, which is a bunch of punk covers. And it's punk covers, so it's not Judas Priest, but like it's a covers album. Just throw Dissident Aggressor on that if you love it so much. I don't know. Yeah. I still love it as a cover. I think it's a great cover, but for me, just being in the mainline track, I just can't get behind it. I just don't know why bands did this.
Yeah, and I can respect that.
Yeah. So then we get to the closing tracks, the final two, which is Spill the Blood for South of Heaven versus Seasons in the Abyss. Now, Cody, this is the one time I'm going to please ask you to go first, because for me, this is a slaughter for one of these songs. And I'm interested to see if you agree with me.
Seasons in the Abyss is good. Mike, I love you. You were a dear friend. You're out of your fucking mind if you think it's better than Spill the Blood. Spill the Blood.
Are you?
Spill the Blood. Dude, get out of here. Spill the Blood is like breaking necks. Spill the Blood is like lambs being led to the slaughter. It hit so hard and it doesn't stop. And I think,
are you for real right now?
I am. Seasons in the Abyss, dude. Good song, good riff. Nowhere near it. Spill the Blood, I could have flipped a table. I straight up could have. I was like, I was invincible. It was like 9 shots of adrenaline straight in the arm, dude.
Am I dreaming right now? Like,
no.
Is this real?
It's absolutely real.
Are you? How can that possibly be the case?
It just hit me harder.
Again, we're arguing great songs here. Spill the Blood's a great song. I think it's a great closer. I think it's cool. I think they go back to the slow thing they did on South of Heaven, and it also sounds like you're being freight lifted into hell, and that's cool, and I like it. But man, Seasons in the Abyss, the song is like, it's one of those moments where it's like a Black Album moment where you're like, man, I could see this song crossing over. Like, yeah, it's heavy and it's still Slayer, but like it has this vibe to it where you're like, this sounds like Slayer matured in some way. Where like they had Rain and Blood, they had South of Heaven, and now it's a moment where it's like, okay, let's actually make like a real classical type composition, which again, it's not classical music. I'm not saying that, but like this is something that I could see the San Francisco Symphony playing, like a cover of this. I couldn't see them playing a cover of Spill the Blood. I could see them playing a cover of Seasons in the Abyss. And I mean, I think all the members of Slayer are great. We haven't talked about this quite yet. I think all of them are very talented, but I think Dave Lombardo by far is the best musician in Slayer.
100%.
Because he sort of like led the way for what metal drumming would become, both fast and the double kick and all that stuff. And the fill at 1:10. If you don't remember it, go back and listen to it. The fill at 1:10 in Seasons in the Abyss is one of the greatest drum fills I think ever. Like it's just so good. It's the where he's doing like quarter notes, like boom, 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 like I can't do it well because I can't like mimic as fast as it is. But at the end of it, they come in with the burn, like the whole group comes in. And one, it's just cool fill, but what it does for the song too, I think is like it's one of those like classical composition moments where like I feel like I'm listening to something Mozart would do if he were alive now and was influenced by this music. Like I feel like Mozart, again, it's a lofty claim, but I think Mozart and Bach and Beethoven would think of music this way. Whereas Spill the Blood, I mean, again, it's cool and I like it, but like I don't feel that way when I listen to Spill the Blood. I'm just head bobbing. I don't get pumped or adrenaline kicked when I hear Spill the Blood. So we have that sort of delineation. And I don't get like adrenaline heavy on Seasons in the Abyss either, but I definitely feel more when I listen to Seasons than I do Spill the Blood.
I think the issue with Seasons is it is a damn good song. It just fell so late into the record. I wouldn't have made that the closer.
What?
No, because for me, and like I said, I got Slayer fatigue. It got to this, and I was like, come on. Why is this song? That song, I was like, why is this song 5 fucking minutes? Holy shit.
Because every second is deserved in that song. Every second is great.
But then you get to Spill the Blood, and it feels like they're running it. Dude, it feels like it's like that moment at the end of a really, really uplifting movie where it's like, oh yeah, this is the last of the juice. This is the last of the energy that they have, and they're crushing through this. And I don't know. This might be one where I might be entirely wrong in a week, you know? But I just think right now and in the past listens, Seasons in the Abyss, fantastic song. Very much deserves to be the title track. Spill the Blood just hit harder for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in your description of the way that the song works, I'll agree with you.
And the thing too that I like about Seasons in the Abyss over Spill the Blood is that Spill the Blood's literal ending, the ending of the song. It's a very sudden ending. It's the boom, 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 and then it ends. And Seasons does like they throw a gong in there. It's just like it's the whole album close, like it's sunsetting the album, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Spill the Blood, it feels like flicking the lights off, which is cool. But Seasons in the Abyss, it looks like it feels like the sun is setting, like. And to me, again, it's one of those like classical things where like classical musicians would do this. They wouldn't just stop it most of the times. They'd allow it to like ease into the end, which I think Seasons does that really well. And on top of it, the music video, they didn't have one for Spill the Blood, I don't think, but the Seasons in the Abyss music video where they're playing in front of the pyramids of Giza, and it's like you just have Slayer playing what like above like the tombs of ancient Egypt. Like it's just cool. It's just cool. Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right, but you swayed me.
What?
You swayed me.
Cody, I'm not, and I kind of love that we were so against each other there. I think that's the most heated we've ever gotten on one of these episodes so far.
It is, but yeah, I mean, I think that I'm trying to not allow myself to be so hard fast, because for me, I think that music hits me in a very emotional level. Like music hits me in the same way that like the shift of the season does, where it's like I'm either really into it or it's like it just doesn't do it for me. So it's hard for me to like allow. I'm trying to be better about allowing myself to have just objective viewpoints on it. And I think you're right. I think that Seasons in the Abyss, the way it sunsets, the attempts to kind of bring in new sounds and attempt to do new things that make the song better instead of just we're Slayer, we're fast as fuck, you know, everybody's bleeding by the time we're done. I think that and
in retrospect, now obviously we knew what happened after this, but this was the last album that Dave was on for several years until he came back in the 2000s. So like for this to be at the time Dave's final moment with the band, for it to like sunset that way, I think it's kind of, I mean, it's weird to say that Slayer has a beautiful moment, but I think it's kind of beautiful of like Dave just, and I think Seasons in the Abyss is Dave's finest moment in Slayer.
Yeah.
I think it's his best drumming across the board. I think he drums amazing in everything he does, but like Seasons in particular, some of those fills are just insane. So that plays a part of it too. But yeah, I mean, I didn't want to sway you if, you know, but again, that's just how I feel about it personally.
No. And, you know, I think that you're right. I might like the song Spilled Blood more, but it doesn't mean that Spilled Blood should be the closer for Season in the Abyss. You know, as the record, it works perfect. You know, so I think you're right. I'll take the L on this one.
It's not about taking L's, Cody.
I know.
It's just trying to figure out what's what. And as far as track by track is concerned, what that puts us at is both of us chose 6 for Seasons and both of us chose 4 for South. Which again, the track by track does not dictate, oh, that means that we think Seasons is better. Which I'll give you the floor to speak about South overall. But for me, I think South overall is great. Obviously, it's the upper echelon of Slayer albums. But for me, actually, my personal ranking is Rain and Blood's number 1, Seasons is number 2, Hell Awaits is number 3, and then South of Heaven is number 4. I love Hell Awaits. I think that record is totally underrated. And why Seasons in the Abyss I think is so great is that I think as a band altogether, it's their greatest work of composition as a band. Obviously, I think Rain and Blood I prefer it more. It's the record I will go to forever. Again, like I said earlier in the episode, it's probably, depending on the day, it's my favorite metal record of all time. But compositionally, I think Seasons is their greatest moment. I think it's their greatest potential crossover moment. And when people say that Seasons in the Abyss is their favorite Slayer album or the best Slayer album, I can't really argue against it. I'm like, I totally get it. I buy it. But for me, it is number 2 under Rain, but it is above South.
Yeah, after this conversation, I can kind of see that perspective. I think South of Heaven, for me personally, flows better, but I think Season in the Abyss has more cinematic moments. Like, Season just kind of feels bigger, where South of Heaven, I don't know if you've ever listened to like Fugazi, for example. They did that thing where they did it was 13 songs and then Repeater and then In on the Kill Taker. And when you get to In on the Kill Taker, they pretty much said no cool shit, boiling it down to just the tightest version of Fugazi possible. And what I think that does, it makes this really pointed kind of animal, where it's like, we don't have there's no fat on this. It is the tightest version of this band. But I think that, Season flows better as a Slayer record instead of all these riffs kick ass. Because I mean, Slayer, you know, as much as they're remembered for their riffs, it's like, no, that was a band of 5 people. You can't just hold cool riffs over everything. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I do want to, and we can end it after this because we're at an hour and 18 here, but one thing I definitely want to talk about is packaging and album covers here. Because there is one case here where I will give you South of Heaven every day. The South of Heaven album cover is fucking sick. Like it's so cool. Again, for me, Rain and Blood is, I think, iconic album coverage. But South of Heaven is just like the skull in the blood pool and the cross behind it and the cathedral of like the bats and the demons coming out of it. It's very cool. But I love the Seasons in the Abyss cover. I think it's also cool, like just the face with like people spewing out of it.
Yeah.
Like, why in the love of God is there a red border around the album? It is so like, I don't know what choice there was to have this red. Look at the Seasons in the Abyss cover. If you don't remember this, there is literally a red border around the whole thing. And I'm just like, why? It's just so like, especially on the vinyl, when you hold the packaging of the vinyl, you're like, what is this? Like, why is there a whole red border around this thing? I would have preferred it just been that image and that be the edges. But like, for some reason they're like, let's add this red border to it. And it's just, I don't know. It's one of my least favorite Slayer records album covers because of that. Just because of that red border.
You know what?
I don't know. I just hate it.
I dead to rights bet it was because they thought they needed to like elevate it. I bet they looked at everything else and said it's these pictures that um these paintings that are just standalone. And I think that when they get to seasons, I bet they were like, oh yeah, let's make this like it's the purpose is it's supposed to be a piece of art. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's weird that the border isn't clean. It's weird that it kind of drips and oozes and stuff. And it's like, if you guys are listening, if you guys are going to make something a border, make it a border. Stop trying to let all of the intensity come from the actual image, not from the combination of the image with the frame.
And it definitely, compared to, I think it was the same artist for Rain and Blood and South of Heaven. I'm not sure if it was the same artist for Seasons in the Abyss. It totally could have been. But Seasons in the Abyss is definitely the most minimalist of the three. It's got the least amount going on. And there could be an argument for there of being like, well, we need to add something colorful or popping to it, which is the red border. But then look at Divine Intervention, which is their next album.
Yeah.
It's extremely minimalist, and yet it's might be my favorite Slayer cover because it's just so like evocative. It's so sick. It oozes Slayer, just like Rain and Blood. That album cover oozes Slayer to me. I just don't really understand why they went with that. So as far as packaging is concerned, I think South of Heaven just dunks on Seasons in the Abyss.
Oh, 100%. I would like a version of South of Heaven that doesn't have the parental advisory.
Oh,
get that on Spotify.
Yeah. I wonder if the vinyl has that, but I'm not going to run over and look right now.
I'm glad that we're out of the parental advisory phase.
Yeah, I like the little E's for explicit.
Yeah,
it gets the point across.
That's fine. Yeah. You don't listen. I'm not a parent. My mom wouldn't care if I came over this and she was like, "Listen to Slayer." Oh, okay, well, you know,
yeah, she'll just walk out of the room. She'll just go somewhere else.
Don't go Columbine it, buddy.
Man, okay, Cody.
that's the direct correlation of that for most people. You listen to heavy metal music, you're going to be a bad person.
I mean, yes. Unfortunately, a lot of older curmudgeons think that heavy metal music has influenced youth to kill people, which, I mean, that's like saying video games influence people to kill people. It's just absurd. But again, it's very explicit, very disturbing music in a way, only because of its subject matter. But I still love it. I still think it's great, which is why I appreciate, Cody, you giving me this opportunity to talk about these records.
Well, I know that one day, hopefully in the not so distant future, I will have the floor to probably cry on microphone about how much Dark Side of the Moon means to me. How much that record shaped the entirety of my adult life.
And I will give you that floor whenever that day comes.
Yeah.
As far as this floor is concerned, is there any final thoughts you want to say?
You know, I think that if you were somebody listening in who has never listened to Slayer, besides like Raining Blood, besides sitting down and giving that song its merit, the denigration of musicianship, of viewed musicianship in metal music, is absolutely insane. In my opinion, there has always been two schools of thought. There have been, if you're good at music, you get into jazz, or you get into metal. Because if you look at what has come, I would say almost 80% of innovation in popular music has found its home from heavy metal or metal music. And don't be afraid to just try something new. If you're going to the gym and for some reason like Kevin Gates isn't doing it to you, or like listening to Lil Wayne doesn't do it, or you want to listen to something new when you're throwing iron around, dude, Slayer will get you more amped than anything else in the world. And allow yourself the opportunity to experience new culture. Because maybe you saw a Slayer shirt at Walmart and you said, "Oh, that looks evil." Listen to it. Don't sit in the fear of the unknown, you know. Spend some time in the Season of the Abyss, you know. Go South of Heaven, fucking find out how cool that shit is, because it might introduce you something new. Like, not to hold this too long, but a few weeks ago, I took our mutual friend Zach Kane to his first hardcore show, and it's like for someone who's never seen a stage dive happen, watching his face as kids were jumping off of things and him going, "They're just allowed to do that." Yeah, it's all communal. I'm gonna do it too. You're gonna watch me get up there and then jump and then catch somebody. Like, experience new things. Stop running into the same things you know.
And to Cody's point, if you think Slayer's evil, I promise you, we could introduce you to some eviler music, some more like if you think Slayer is extreme, you have no idea. Like, there's literally 15 other avenues you could take to more extreme music than Slayer.
Yeah, it gets heavier.
Oh yeah, I mean Converge, I feel like is heavier than Slayer at times.
Yeah,
like that just like again, I love Slayer more. But Slayer to me is like, just a lot of aggression, headbanging, etc. Converge feels like they're ripping my skin off and I'm alive to witness it. Like that's what that feels like. So if you think Slayer is bad in terms of like it's too aggressive, it's too fast, it's too whatever, don't even touch Converge or other bands like it, because you will just be like, I can't believe this is a thing.
Well, and too, I think that there is still this negative image around metal music and heavy metal music. And that really bums me out because I think some of the greatest moments in songwriting history have come from bands like Iron Maiden.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
Or things like Slayer, Metallica, Megadeth. Even if you want to get newer, like Municipal Waste and Power Trip and things like that, like, and that's why it's so important to open yourself up to new things. Because maybe it'll pull something out of you that you didn't know was there. Like there's nothing wrong with if you're driving home from work and you've had a bad day. Listen, man, I get it. I don't want to listen to Chris Stapleton if I had a shit day at work. No, I'm sorry. I want to listen to Tom Araya scream about Ed Gein.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. Be cool with it.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, Cody, thank you for joining me for this conversation, as you always do.
Mike, thank you for having me.
Of course. For the listener, hopefully you are enlightened to Slayer if you haven't already been. I know it's tough, but please just give it a chance. And beyond that, we shall see you on the next one. So take care, everybody.
Be well.